Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Missions. Today we're going to talk to our country director for Zambia and North America, David Woods, and he's going to talk to us about how he defines missionary work in the many years he's spent serving around the world and how God has provided for him and his team as he's served.
And we're going to find out which animal David Woods thinks he can take.
And we're going to find out which one of us David had most fun traveling with. Spoiler alert, it's not Sydney and Dustin.
All right, let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Missions. I'm Dustin Com, and I'm here with our communication specialist, Sydney Needles.
Hi everyone.
And with our VP of Marketing, Julie Lee.
Hi.
And today we're joined by Maranatha's country director for Zambia and North America, David Woods. David, welcome.
Thank you.
David, you were on the very first episode of Inside Missions, and it was just me grilling you back then. Now we got a whole panel of people that are going to ask you really hard questions.
We've upped the ante. We want to know more.
I'm bracing myself. So
It takes 3 people to interview you, Dave.
David spent many years working for Maranatha in Africa. David, we want to learn about your journey and how you've seen God at work in your own life and also in the work of Maranatha. And so we'll be talking about that. First, though, you and Sydney were just recently, probably the last time you guys saw each other was halfway around the world in Zambia.
I think so, yeah.
Sydney, tell us why you went and what you were doing there.
So I went on a media trip as a producer, and we were collecting stories for our TV show and print stuff like that. As a relatively new Maranatha employee, I'm still visiting countries where we're working for the first time. And so that was my first trip to Zambia. And I feel like it was a good one because I got to go to 3 different work locations. It felt like a packed trip. I don't know. Do you usually have that kind of action in one span of 10 days?
That's unusual. Yeah. Usually when we have a volunteer project, it's limited to the focus of the volunteer. We had 2 school handovers that we did while you were there. So that was good.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon for you to do a whole tour of the country in a short amount of time, right? If you're doing site visits, you might hit a lot of different places within a short amount of time.
Yeah. And particularly when I don't go with a volunteer project,
then I
spend more time visiting more
spend
sites.
Lots of hours in the car.
Out on the open, sometimes potholed road.
Imagine that. They have teams that install them.
The potholes.
The potholes.
Yeah.
Prefer it.
They go just before you a few miles and install them.
Right, exactly.
David, some people may have listened to our very first episode where you kind of tell your whole story. If you haven't, go back, listen to episode 1 with David. But for those who haven't heard it or maybe haven't heard it for a while, we're curious. Did you always want to be a missionary?
Actually, yeah, I did have a desire to do that and went to Africa when I was 19 as a volunteer student missionary from Andrews University, and then went later with my wife for a couple of years to Malawi. Then we did short-term stuff to Belize, Mexico, from Oregon with school groups and stuff. And I desired to do it full-time. I was doing construction and remodeling and stuff, and my friend who I used to go on trips with, he says, Dave, just bloom where you're planted. Wherever God has you, that's your mission field. And so we did that. But then God talked to me over 19 years ago now and told me to call Maranatha at camp meeting.
But I kind of want to know, you went when you were 19, and I know a lot of students do that for their student missionary experience, but how old were you when you do you remember the moment that you kind of started being curious about the mission field? Were you a young boy? Were you reading stories? Or how did that happen?
Well, I grew up in a home where we heard a lot of mission stories, like books, and we had the Uncle Arthur Bible story, or we had stuff on records, the old big vinyls and with the scratches and stuff. And so I heard a lot of that kind of stuff, Eric B. Hare stories, all this kind of thing. It gave me a curiosity of something I had never seen, but with interest. And Africa was particularly the place that I'd heard about and wanted to go to. So,
did you guys ever have this desire of becoming a missionary? Or
I did not listen to Eric B. Hare. I loved Uncle Arthur bedtime stories, but no, I didn't, which
Eric
is why
B. Hare. That sounds so familiar.
Oh, you're so young, Sydney.
No, I know I've heard it before.
I need to explain to her what a vinyl record is too.
I know what a vinyl record is. Come on now.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think when I was younger, my desire for mission work was, if I'm being honest, strongly tied to my desire to travel. I think it wasn't until my parents kind of took me on mission trips when I was younger. It wasn't until I actually was there and experienced kind of the service aspect of it where I was like, oh, okay, this part is actually cool too.
Yeah,
How about you,
I
Dustin?
don't know that I ever really had like a strong desire to like live as a missionary full time like you have, David, internationally. That's something that I think it's interesting. Sydney, you were kind of bringing it up yesterday that for a lot of people, if they think dedicating my life to God 100%, that means full-time missionary work, right? And she was curious yesterday. I don't want to steal your question, but since
I don't remember it fully, so you
He's
should
about
just
to
say
steal
it.
your question,
since I
Sydney.
set it up, I might as well finish it. But basically, some people would consider that the end all of like serving God with their whole life. Did you feel that you had done that? What did you feel once you actually got to live that out?
I want to clarify the idea of being a missionary doesn't mean going somewhere, because we're, like my friend told me who used to go on these trips with me, is to bloom where you're planted. You have a mission field and whoever you're interacting with, and that's what I like to encourage people to think that way, because I have people I know that are related to some that refer to going to the mission field as if that's when service begins, and God's calling us to be his representatives, make disciples everywhere, so your neighborhood's your mission field.
Absolutely.
So some of us are willing to go places and have an adventuresome spirit to go see what we haven't been used to, but it's not, not like you have to get on an airplane to.
No, I agree, and I think it's a really good message to push even with Maranatha, because to me, in my years of experience working here, is exactly that. That's what I've learned. It's you can go out to the mission field, but then come back home and apply like what you've learned there back to your own neighborhoods, because what good it is if you're only a missionary because you've traveled somewhere. I think there's so much to be learned on a short-term mission trip or on a long-term mission service, but then bring it back home, because service opportunities are everywhere.
We see that so much with volunteers who come with that idea that we're going to bless others, and then that you hear them make these comments as the project goes along, how they're so blessed, and they come back just really fired up. I remember hearing a pastor years ago that spoke at our convention and had led a bunch of trips with his church, and talked about how it just ignited a sense of unity and a passion for mission within their church, the Corona Church in Southern California. So much activity with mission that the connection between older people, younger people, they're like family. They see each other on Sabbath. It's not like, oh, that's a different generation, I don't interact. There's just this cohesive feel that is developed through the shared service and sweating, praying, worshiping, working together and all.
I hear that all the time in interviews with project leaders too. They're always so surprised at everyone's getting along, like all these different people. And some more surprised than others, I guess. I don't know the backstory there, but usually they're just like, everybody, like, no complaints, everybody's happy, everybody unified under a common purpose is a common theme that I get.
I think that's
you
healthy.
still have to answer the question, though, now that you've clarified your definition of missionary.
And he asked the question of...
What was the question?
The question was,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, repeat the question, Dustin. Repeat Sydney's question.
Yeah,
Dustin.
exactly. So people have this idea that if they're going to go all out and serve God, that they're going to be a full-time missionary out in the world. Do you feel like you reached that, if that is like the end all of like fulfilling a life of service to God, that you reached that, and how did it feel if you did?
I don't get that feeling like I've arrived at something. I feel like the call is still always there. Every day you wake up with a new opportunity, and I remember as a contractor, I used to pray that God would give me opportunities, like just use me today. I don't know, I wanted to be a player that was going to get into the game and not just be someone who trained and then sat on the bench and watched others play, so I still feel that way. So it's not like, oh, now I've arrived at some destination, I've just been in a life experience and journey that's afforded me a lot of interesting opportunities. Praise the Lord for that.
I think that's a great perspective, and what you'd said earlier just about serving wherever you're at, because there is this misconception, I guess, with some potential volunteers that I have to know how to do construction because they know Maranatha is a construction company. And yet, we see it every week almost. We see photos of young volunteers, old volunteers, people with no experience, people that are, skilled. with construction, but anybody can serve. It's just all about your mindset.
I tell people when I speak to churches or get up in front of a group or whatever, I just tell them, check for a pulse. You have a pulse, you're qualified. Like that's the only requirement is a willingness, to serve, and then we have a place for you. So.
And I think you automatically go to construction, but actually sometimes the people that we're really looking for are, say, cooks in the kitchen to help feed our volunteers or medical staff. And so it's not just construction. It's sometimes our greatest
broad
need
range,
is
skills.
filling in those other things, so people shouldn't limit themselves. But I know you've talked about this in your first podcast that Justin referenced, but I don't think I really know all of the places David has served. I mean, I should, because I've worked with you for a while, but yeah, list them, David.
Well, I moved to Lesotho when I was 19. I turned 19 on my way over as a student missions. Partway through the year, the division president asked me to move to Zaire, which is now the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and build churches. And I was there for a couple more weeks, and I got the word that I was supposed to drive a truck from Johannesburg up. So I drove a truck from Joburg, South Africa, through Rhodesia during the war, Zambia to Zaire, and then I worked up there for a few months in the Kasai region.
And you were not married at that time?
I was 19, single.
Okay.
Yeah. And we wrote aerograms to our parents. We didn't have internet.
Okay,
and so
now I don't
actually even know what that is.
So it's
Okay,
a really thin piece of paper, and
Paper is this thing that you write on.
and it's exactly,
Continue.
and you write on that. It licks the edges, closes it up, it becomes its own envelope, and then you mail it. And it takes 3 weeks to get there. And so my mom didn't even know I was in Zaire before I was already there before she heard about it. But so it was a 6-week turnaround on a question, how are you? Then you say, I'm fine. And then 6 weeks later, they would get the answer. So it was a unique way of communication. But so then I went to...
Hold on a second. What was it like driving through a war?
Little sketchy. Yeah, I missed a convoy in Fort Victoria, which is now Masvingo. We built a school in Masvingo, and the guy waved me on, and I thought I was supposed to catch these trucks ahead of me, and I finally caught up with them, and they were oil tankers, and they wouldn't let them go with convoys because they'd shoot at them and blow them up. And so I went that distance up to Salisbury, which is now Harare, without a convoy, and I was a little nervous, going real slow up these hills and worried about someone jumping on the truck. And anyways, it was interesting. And then I hitchhiked over to Bulawayo and picked up a lady with a car and drove her back to Salisbury, and so it was interesting.
What an adventure!
Yeah,
honestly,
didn't tell my mom all these 19. So,
yeah, you didn't mention that in your what's it called?
No, the
Were you
aerogram.
always somebody who
aerogram.
liked to flirt with danger? I
No,
mean,
not-
seriously, because we talk about, I think it takes a special personality to do these kind of adventurous jobs. I mean, were you, even as a kid, the guy that was...
Well, he was telling us before we started all about the broken bones that he's
Yeah.
had throughout his life. So
Yeah,
it
maybe
seems
you
like
weren't-
he's not
maybe you
like
weren't that
risk
good at
averse.
it.
Maybe you don't even need to answer. Maybe we already know.
Yeah. No, I've been a fairly adventuresome person, but not a risk seeker. Like I'm not someone who does things intentionally, knowing that you might just die. That's not something I don't jump off with wingsuits off of cliffs or anything. One of those deals. But
So 19-year-old you in this vehicle driving through this conflict, did you ever stop and think, what am I doing? Like, I shouldn't have done this, or...
no, I thought keep the foot down on the throttle and keep moving, to
Just
get
keep
to the other
going.
side. And then I saw the first elephant. The only elephant the whole year I was over there was up in Zimbabwe, close to the Zambia border. And it's a real hilly area. And there was this one elephant, and I was all nervous. I stopped my truck, ran back with a camera, took a picture, and jumped in. And, I was just assuming that behind every bush was a risk and a threat. And it wasn't quite that way. But anyways, yeah, it was interesting. So, and then I went to Africa with my wife, late 80s, and we worked at Malamulo Hospital a couple years there, and then we moved to Haiti and worked with ADRA down in Haiti, and then we went back to then we did short-term stuff in Mexico and Belize with local church groups and school groups, and then my wife and I moved to Africa with Maranatha 2007 January.
Which country was that?
To Mozambique.
Mozambique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we started working there, and then as we progressed, we went to Malawi, and then we lived in Zimbabwe, and we were working in Swaziland, Lesotho. We built one church in South Africa, Namibia, Zambia. So all of the southern and central East African countries, we did some work there. But
So how many years total in Africa?
I've lived a little over 12 years in Africa, and then now 22 years, inclusive of Maranatha's time, that I've worked in Africa and still go back and forth.
Sydney, I don't know if you picked up on this when you guys were in Zambia. There was a lot going on. But I remember a couple years ago, I was with you, David, in Africa, in Zambia, at the Bethel Clinic project. And I got to say, the passion, the love for Zambia, for Africa, just came out of David and his wife Susan. And why do you love Africa so much?
I like Africa's mostly rural. I'm a country boy, so I like the rural parts of Africa more than the big cities. I like the culture of Africa is very the social network, the family, the extended family is very important to Africans, and so they support each other as they get old and someone's too tired to work in the garden. Well, some family member feeds them, and they're also the story is very important to an African. The personal relationship, they'll stop on the path, talk, engage in that thing, which to people from an outside culture, like, oh, they're wasting time, or how come they didn't get to work on time? But, well, they had an important encounter along the way, and that's a big deal. So those things are interesting to me, and they're very welcoming and, just friendly. I mean, I find the African people, in the rural areas particularly, just very welcoming, and so it's easy to engage with them and have fun. They love stories, they love humor. So when you engage with them in ways that are humorous, they all laugh, and it's just cool.
I definitely picked up on that when I was there in Zambia specifically, most recently. When we want to get certain pictures or shots of different things, sometimes we have to talk to strangers and be like, hey, can we take your picture? And fully understand if people aren't comfortable with that, not a problem. But I did notice in Zambia, most people are like laughing, like, oh yeah, let's do this, right. Or just happy to talk and happy to meet someone new and do something new. And it was a cool dynamic there.
I found Zambia to be quite friendly too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because a lot of the people we met spoke English there. So there was not all of them, but a lot of them did. And so there didn't seem to be this language barrier that you might have in other places. So we were able to communicate a little easier. But I mean, regardless of that, I think they're just friendly people, at least that I've encountered.
No, they are.
I can't compare to like some of the other places. Some of the other places I've been, but I don't remember Zimbabwe. I was in Zimbabwe with you for quite a while. We were camping through Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
I do.
But did they speak English there? I don't remember.
That country, of all the southern African countries, you will find English deep into the bush, well-spoken English. It's a very well-educated country. Yes, in Zimbabwe. Right. So Malawi, on their other hand, is the warm heart of Africa. That's their advertising thing, and it is. It's one of the friendliest places. And Zambia is the same culture, super friendly people. But when you travel, you don't find English as readily spoken, off the main road, so to speak, where Zimbabwe's way deep in the bush. You got very clear speaking English guys, and ladies.
When I was with you in Zambia a couple of years ago, you were speaking local languages, not just English. So I don't know what language that would have been, but how long did it take you? How long did it take you and how did you learn that language?
Well, when I worked at Malamulo Hospital back in the 80s, I had a whole team of maintenance guys at Malamulo Hospital working for me and with me. And so it was during that time that I put an effort into learning. I'd go out in the village and buy lumber or buy supplies and gravel and whatever from people who were breaking rocks with a hammer. And so you're communicating or trying to learn how to communicate with people like that. And so that language is spoken in much of Zambia. You find people that understand it. It's called Nyanja. It's like a different layer of Chichewa, but that's a broadly spoken language. Of the 73 languages in Zambia, it's one that anywhere in the country you use the words, they'll understand what you're saying. Not that they speak exactly the same language, but so I've forgotten a lot of what I used to know, and I just use what I know, and it usually gets a smile, and that's good for a police roadblock, if you greet them in their language and are cordial. So
one thing it's really been interesting for me to see in working for Maranatha is Kenya, Zambia. There's so many different people groups within each country. that they consider themselves maybe a part of a certain tribe first before this, the country. That was a unique thing with all the languages you mentioned. That it's not just one group of people, right?
No, it isn't. And there's Bantu languages is the language group that's over all of southern African countries. Even Swahili up in Kenya is a Bantu language. So there's overlaps in these languages that the same word maybe has a different letter to begin with, but it's, and it can be spoken. So you can travel quite broadly if you understand one of the main languages. You'll understand them, they'll understand you to a certain degree. Not deep stuff, but, it's so. And if you know how to greet people and are friendly, whatever, you don't have to go deep into their language to have just made a connection, so.
Yeah.
That's good because can't go too deep with it.
Well, the crazy thing about, I think a lot of people don't realize is some of our field staff, more than others, but particularly perhaps people in Africa who are serving with us in Africa, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you are doing just so much travel, and you are in areas where there are no road maps, like you're just putting in GPS coordinates and hoping that little thing on the dash will get you there. And I went with you on a trip like that, our media team, and we were camping. Your wife was with us. She was cooking over an open fire for us to eat really great food because she's an amazing cook. But you had to do that a lot, right? Just camp through countries as you're visiting these sites that are in need of churches.
I had a rooftop tent on my pickup, and you could just find a spot, park by a church. I used to look for churches. Didn't matter what denomination. I'd find a church and ask if I could camp in their yard, and then just set up. One night we did that at a church, and it happened to be an Adventist church. We're coming back from a repair in Mozambique, and it's a narrow little spot between the bushes and the church, and it's kind of quiet. Well, it's dark at 6:00, so my colleague and I were in there watching Top Gear on a laptop, and all of a sudden the vehicle starts wiggling. There's kids standing on the running board looking in the window watching TV with us, and that was fun. Well, then a generator starts, and the lights at a little house behind us, like a disco started up and all this noise. We're trying to sleep in the tent until it was wild. But
I know that happens, right? I always get surprised when you think you're really in the middle of nowhere with no electricity, and then somebody pulls out a cell phone.
And they start
filming you.
The loudspeakers start going.
No, it was fun.
But no, I mean, you are so adventure. There's a lot of adventure, I'm assuming, in your life.
Have you ever had any moments when you're out there doing the work and you're just having so much fun, you can't believe you're actually you get to do this?
Every morning. No, there are days like that. There are experiences like that. I think it's been a privilege to be able to do stuff that I enjoy and get paid to be there. And, and that's what I appreciate about continuing to be a part of Africa, even though we don't live there, is to get to go back and engage with the people and see the joy when you finish a church or hand over a school or whatever, so it's good stuff.
It's not really easy work, I guess you would say, but when the work does get hard, what keeps you going?
You're constantly, I have been constantly reminded and given examples of how God is working with us in this thing. So it's not like you're just like, we're out on our own and it's super remote and, you feel like you're just on your own. I mean, it's like we have God's presence with us and we see him doing things on our behalf that is a faith building and an encouragement to us, So if we start to wander in our thinking, we just have to remind ourselves of how God's been with us in the past, and it's an encouragement, It's not every day is fun and games, Sleeping in the tent when it's really hot, you get prickly heat, there's no air conditioning, no
What's
fan.
Prickly heat? I've never heard of that.
Well, it feels like somebody's taking pins and poking them into your back all over.
Sounds delightful.
Like acupuncture. It's probably really good
I've
for
never
you.
experienced that, but having hundreds of pins all at the same time, it's and that's like all night long when it's super hot and
Sounds
sweaty.
nice.
Sounds fun.
So,
well, I'm sure there's been some low moments. Has there ever been a moment where you were like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about
I've
too.
never had that.
You've never had that?
Never.
Where you just wanted to pack it up and give up because
No.
it's too hard?
I plucked almost all my hair out, but I left a little bit on top just in case. But no, I haven't. I've never had those kind of thoughts. No. There's still time. I mean, but so far not, you know.
Well, maybe we can see if you want to quit this podcast early. We're going to go into a quick little rapid fire question round with David
Brace
Woods.
myself.
I'm excited for these answers.
All right.
Drum roll, somebody. All right. Just kidding.
Oh, too late.
All right. So I'm going to ask you questions, and you're just going to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. No explanations. Maybe we'll ask some follow-ups later. But,
All right.
All right. First one is, what is your favorite local African food dish?
Cassava leaves in Mozambique, cooked and pounded into, chopped up fine. Put coconut milk with peanuts chopped up or ground up in that, and they put it as a relish on top of rice or cassava. It's very tasty.
That does sound good.
What's the most disgusting thing you've ever had to eat?
There was a plant that they thought to be a delicacy that they cooked for us, and Christina was there with us, I think, in Mozambique over a weekend on Thanksgiving, actually, and the ladies were camping with us, and they spent the whole day with some little weed that they were chopping, cooking, whatever. Unfortunately, it was dark when we had the meal, and they gave it to us, and it was inedible. It was so bitter. It was like unbelievable bad.
Christina's our director of television, and she's in
Can
the
you
room. Can
confirm?
you affirm that?
And I walked.
Kakana, she's
Kakana?
saying.
Okay,
Christina
well,
said Kakana.
amazing
You couldn't
memory.
remember the name of it.
No, but
yeah.
I went over out of the campfire light and, pulled a heel in the sand and made a little hole and did a little burial. I mean, I couldn't eat it. It was,
Well, if
I
you
tried.
didn't hear, people,
That's an
because
advanced
Christina's not near a mic, she said, yes, it was terrible. But not to
yeah,
be
so that was the
insulting
worst.
of her.
Sorry, you asked for no explanation. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
African animal that you're most scared of?
The mosquito.
Makes sense.
That's smart.
Which African animal do you think you could take down?
This was my question.
Take down?
Yeah.
The mosquito.
The mosquito, yeah.
We're talking, I don't know what you were thinking, but I'm picturing like wrestling.
A
I'm
crocodile.
saying like if you
Crocodile, Dave.
encountered it,
Crocodile Dave, no.
I'm saying if you encountered it close proximity, you could debilitate it
Hand fighting.
and move on.
Well, the ones that I feel like I could do that with aren't actually, they don't attack people, like an
Okay, what ones
impala or
then?
something.
That's not the question.
Okay, but you
if they were to attack you,
Yeah, if they
How
were.
about you
had
taken down snakes? Like you've
I've
had
killed
to
lots
kill
of snakes.
snakes.
Yes,
yeah,
I
that's
have.
good. Poisonous.
And I'm not afraid of them.
But you
Okay.
didn't.
I have
He didn't
healthy-
technically, he didn't
Healthy
wrestle
respect,
him
but no,
Yeah.
because wrestling a snake, a black mamba would be not smart. Correct.
no, not the wrestling part.
All right, best safari park.
Best safari park, Kruger.
Best Sabbath afternoon activity in Africa.
Kruger.
Where's
Where-
Kruger at?
Yeah, that's
Kruger
what I'm-
National Park is in South Africa, and we lived in close proximity in Maputo, and we used to go over once a month.
Your favorite African cultural tradition?
As I was referring to earlier, the social connections between people. What we lack in America is the willingness to interrupt what is important and actually engage with people who might come into our sphere, and interrupt us, but they will, put a kettle on, as they say, and make a cup of tea and actually engage. We miss that.
Last question. Out of the three of us, who's your favorite person to travel with?
Ooh, this is a tricky.
It's also
This
not
is an
fair
important
because
one.
we've only traveled once together, so we'll assume with more.
There's others in the room,
Leo's
too.
not part of the vote.
I don't.
Dave.
The favorite.
Dave,
This
look at
is-
me,
this
look
is
at
a
me.
difficult-
I don't think
Quick-
you
quick
actually.
answer,
I don't think
quick
you
answer.
actually have to answer this.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
We
Oh
all
my
know
goodness.
it's
How
gonna
about
be
the best
me.
qualities of each person? Please.
What? Why
Bring it
are
on.
we making him do this?
To say,
Just
think
say
about
it.
the
Just say
times,
it's me.
Julie.
Come on. Thank you.
Well, because
Thank you.
It was it was her also, but the trip.
It wasn't you
The
that
trip. I know
Nice.
we
He's
did.
offended.
But Julie, we did
What
that
trip
was an
are you
interesting
thinking
trip.
of?
The water development trip we did in Zimbabwe in the Zambezi Valley was a memorable. Was Tom with us?
It was Tom Lloyd, who is our director of IT, and he also did photography. And it was Leo.
And Leo.
Leo Macias, who's here
Yeah,
in
and
the
we
studio with us.
did we baked bread over the fire. We cooked interesting meals. We unfortunately didn't hit water everywhere we were hoping to, but that was a very interesting and memorable trip.
So you
Yeah,
guys
it
just
was.
followed the water well crew
we were
around
with the
to
water well
different-
crew, yeah,
Okay.
and drilled at several different sites. Yeah,
That would
That
be
was
fun.
Zimbabwe.
it was in
correct?
Zimbabwe.
Yes. And I remember That was a very memorable trip for me too, and really adventurous. And it was the first time I experienced not being able to fulfill what we had set out to do, which was we were drilling. And I think, Leo, you remember that? We were drilling at a site, and not to take it down from the fun that we were laughing about, but honestly, we were drilling at a place in the middle of nowhere. We really, really needed to hit water there, and we did not. We tried. And
two places we walked away from with no water.
Right.
It was very disappointing.
And we just, I don't know for the guys, Leo and Tom, but I know for me, I think we were all talking about it in the car. We felt bad, even though we knew it wasn't our fault, but we also felt this shame of, we've got to get out of here. We don't want to see the disappointment on their faces. And I still remember sitting in the car looking out at the people and kind of wanting to cry just because we couldn't provide the water for them, but it just wasn't there.
And they were there all day watching us drill, and we kept going deeper.
And it's like made worse because that one site had, weren't they burning coal in the ground, and there were like flames coming out of the ground? They do that, right? Where they take pieces of wood and they
make charcoal.
To make charcoal. And I think there was the second site that we were at, it's already so hot. And then they had these places where they were burning coal, and then we're trying to provide them water, and you just literally felt like the fire coming out of the earth and the fire coming from the sky, and we couldn't get them water, and it was devastating. But it's the reality.
I experienced that too in Brazil once. People think of Brazil as being this green, Amazon jungle, but in the Northeast it's just really dry. It's a desert, and we drilled all day, and the lady who was kind of the leader of the church who lived right next to it, I remember our country director there, Marcos, going up and like delivering the news to her, and she just like didn't really want to accept it, and he was very sad. We were all sad, and yet it's not a given, right? It's not a given that it's.
I've never been on a water trip necessarily, so I've never experienced that. But I'm curious, like, how do we know when to make that call of like, okay, we're not going to drill anymore, we have to give up?
When we run out of pipe, drill stem,
so
not
we'll
literally. I mean, no, we could drill deeper than, but there's a range where water is found in an area, and just to drill a 900-foot hole in a place that water isn't found that deep. We drilled through coal on that trip in the Zambezi Valley. There's a lot of coal there, and we drilled down through coal and part of that operation. But there was a point where either geology reports that we've had done ahead of time or soundings that we've done with our own equipment tells you where the range might be. Well, if you're not getting it and you go even a ways beyond, which is what we did then.
Yeah.
Because
you're probably just getting further.
It becomes kind of pointless. You're just burning diesel fuel and wearing out equipment, and you're not going to come up with water then if you just keep going.
Which, of course, those are resources that can be used somewhere with, more prospects.
Very disappointing.
But is it when you're there, it's your call, right?
Typically, yeah. Well, in conjunction with whoever's drilling, to keep going, usually it's my call, well, we're going to invest more money. When we've hired drillers to do stuff, we had a point where they, in Zimbabwe, had told us to drill we could get a break at 49 meters. Don't drill beyond 70 was like the range to get water after a seismic report had been done. Well, we got to 70. We hit a break at 49, a little bit of taste of water, dust still flying out. It was a hired drilling company. Every meter is expensive. So then we go to 70, still nothing. So then we stop and we have a prayer everybody's sitting around watching, all excited. There's a video episode that's on our website about this trip. And we stop and we pray, and we drill down to 79 meters. And 1 meter shy of me calling the thing and pulling the tools, we hit a really good well, and praise the Lord, where everybody's jumping up and down. And
that's the thing, right? Because we do see miracles on this trip, and then sometimes it's just this, like, what if you had stopped at 78, but you went to 79, but then you see I think we all have also experienced those kind of miracle stories. But
I think that's why the prayer part is so important, like asking God for wisdom, like, should I call it, should I not? What's the best decision in these circumstances?
David, you've seen God working in your own personal life. Again, going back to episode 1, there's some great stories of how God has worked for you and with your family. I'm curious about your team. We were talking about the well drilling, and we've had our own well drilling team in different countries. We also have guys that go out and build one-day churches and other churches and schools across the country. You're managing quite a few people. Any stories come to mind of ways God has provided for the crew out in the field as they're traveling from site to site?
There was a story in Malawi where the Laporte family, Bruce and Tanya and Grundy, were running 6 crews building churches in the north of Malawi.
This is a team that used to work with us.
He used to work with us, yeah, and he was our mechanic guy and whatever. But they were up north. We'd waited months to get fuel. We sent them up with a big bunch of fuel, and they were building. They built 33 churches in 1 week, which was the most we'd ever done of the one-day churches. And they had a Sabbath story that they share with where they were in the Land Cruiser and it was on empty, and they drove hundreds of kilometers with no fuel in the Land Cruiser. Like the gauge was on E, and God just kept the engine running, and that was a clear sign to them of, God's provision for them going way beyond. A lot of the stories that I know of, I was engaged with my team on those kinds of stories, so it's not just the disengaged one, but it's ones I witnessed.
You were telling me about a story of towing one vehicle.
Yeah.
And some kind of crazy happened.
Well, there was a young guy that came over as a volunteer to do videography and as well as lead church teams. And he had not a lot of driving experience when he came there. And so with a standard shift, whatever, his suitcase didn't come with him. So every day he's on the phone with the airline. They finally, some place in the planet, find his suitcase. And he calls me. This is in Blantyre, Malawi, very hilly area in Malawi. And he says, my suitcase came in. I'm like, great, go get it. So he drives out to the airport. On the way back, his vehicle quits, and he was like 8 kilometers from where we were based out of, and he told me where it was, and so I drove out there in the night. He says, I put diesel fuel in it, but it won't start. I says, is it even making any noise? No. And it was a diesel vehicle, so he knew enough to put the right fuel in. And so I get out there, and I hook jumpers on, nothing, not a click. So I said, well, I'm going to have to tow you back. We'll solve this. There's big ditches along the road, no guardrail and no shoulder. And they line them with stone or rocks or brick or whatever to keep the water from eroding them. And the road is hilly, follows the hillsides, and then drops up and down. So I get this long kinetic energy strap to pull him with, a rescue thing. And I tell him, keep brakes going. I don't want to drag this thing on the road. It's a very expensive thing. And he'd never been towed before. I said, well, I'll go very slow, 12 miles an hour, 20 kilometers an hour. I'm going to pull him. So my lights are flashing. He's in a white vehicle. We're blocking traffic. So when I finally get him moving, everybody's happy because it goes down to one lane around us. And in the evening, 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, there's a lot of people moving on streets. There are bicycles, people walking back from markets. So we're doing this 8-kilometer thing. He's towing behind me. And we get down to the bottom of a hill under a railroad overpass, and we come to a roundabout, and we're going to go up the hill to the hospital in Blantyre. And I look up the hill, and there's this small car approaching a ways up, and this rope's like 25 feet long, so there's a big gap between us, and this vehicle speeds up and thinks, I can just shoot between them. So I'm seeing him coming fast, and I'm pulling, and he's hooked on. He can't stop. This vehicle goes right between us, and I'm thinking we're going to have a 3-car pileup because it's a big kinetic energy. It's meant to dump the clutch, and you just rev the engine and run, and then it stretches, and then pulls a Land Cruiser out of the mud. It's what it's designed for. We don't even feel it. Like my bumper is, high on the Hilux. It's hooked onto the Nissan. This thing's coming right into it, goes right through that rope. Don't feel a thing. Not a bump, not a wiggle. When I start to go around the corner and this vehicle I'm pulling, now suddenly I'm like hooked to a tree, and I put the clutch in quick before I stall the engine. I look back, and he's not turning. He's just going straight. He entered the roundabout, and then now he's going straight. So I run back, and all the cars are coming, horns honking. I'm like, what's going on? He says, I can't turn my steering wheel. He had never turned the key to unlock his steering wheel. And so I unlock it, I push him back and get him straightened out, and we go up the hill. So that night I get a call, got a truck stuck in this mud out by Melange. I go out there that night, same strap, I'm hooked onto a tree. I'm trying to winch this truck out of the mud. It's in a rice paddy. Next day we go out with another truck to get him out. Well, this young guy goes with us on this trip. Well, the driver of the truck that had gotten the first one stuck, he got the second one stuck on the other side. So now we have 2 trucks stuck, and I'm standing there with this guy, and I said, did you see those 2 miracles that happened last night? And he goes, no, what? And I said, you need to pay closer attention. I said, well, I told you 8 kilometers and you couldn't turn your steering wheel the whole time? I said, you didn't end up in the ditch. You didn't hit anybody. And I said, and that car went right between us. I mean, it would have been right in front of his grill, and we didn't get in an accident. You didn't even feel a bump. I said, I think those were 2 miracles. God's looking down, 2 clowns wandering around in the dark, and nothing happened. And he was watching out for us, And so I just encouraged him and others to, pay attention. God's doing stuff in our lives, and we just need to be aware of it, thank him for it, and then tell others what we see, so it can be an encouragement to other people that God's looking at all the little details of his children's lives and helping them out, But that was kind of a cool 8 kilometers. You can't turn the steering wheel. And it's just a rope. It's not a tow bar. It's not like it's controlling his movements.
Wow.
I like what you said about paying attention because, if we believe God is working in our lives every single day, I mean, there's going to be evidence of it. And I think about how many times maybe I missed out on seeing some of the ways that God is directing, my path and the things that I'm doing just because I'm not paying attention. So I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to try to pay attention to see, what God's up to.
I think a theme a lot of our volunteers will catch on to is they seem to notice things more when they're on a mission trip, right? We tend to notice things when we're overseas internationally. You lived internationally for a long time and then moved back to the U.S. Did you notice that it was less obvious the ways that God was working? Like, did you notice God working in those kinds of ways less when you moved back to the United States?
Probably so.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Well, some of it is we don't work or deal in as challenging circumstances as Africa, and so it probably things become more. You're whether you're conscious of it or not, you're more dependent on some divine intervention to accomplish what we're being called to do. That's a challenge, That could be part of it. I see it in people's lives in Maranatha, North America. Like God's at work in these volunteer lives when we engage in projects and stuff. And so that's something where I see, God manifest himself in ways that are really exciting and faith-building, encouraging.
In all your work with Maranatha, how has your experiences changed how you pray, how you listen to God? How has your relationship with God changed?
Well, see, to me, God has become so real in the engagement that I've had and that He's had with our team and with me that it's my faith has become strong. It's like I don't doubt that He's up to the task. Like in North America, all the money raised for the Paradise shed building thing and all these kinds of things that were like amazing within a few weeks.
So that I'm going to just, for the audience, the Paradise shed building was after the campfire. What year was that?
2019 is when we built. 2018 was the fire, and then we did the first project. Right.
Devastated the town, just lots.
And they saw huge need and didn't know how could they raise money, and so, and just in a short period of time, God showed up with money from many different directions. And
we built sheds for people who were waiting to have their lives rebuilt.
Right.
Yeah, so they could have a place to store their things.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but
no, clarity is helpful. Yeah. Not everybody got to experience that with us, but that was a faith-building experience for that local church and for us, and, to see hundreds and hundreds of volunteers come and engage in that kind of thing. So, yeah, God loves all of us. North America, Africa, Asia, wherever you are, South America, and he's interested in all the details. So I think that's something that we need to just pay attention to, and praise the Lord for the fact that He cares about us immensely. You
have so many great stories from Africa, but you also are director for projects in the United States and Canada. What is most special to you about being able to work on a lot of these projects that happen, usually a couple dozen every year in North America? Yeah, we do a couple dozen. I usually lead one or maybe two of them in North America, but a lot of the most exciting projects for me in North America are camp related, because camp ministry has such a amazing impact on young people who, a lot of them don't even know God, are being sent there to camp and they find Jesus.
at camp, and so our volunteers being a part of that whole ministry is really cool. So I just came from a convention where all these camp professionals are there sharing their stories and encouraging one another, and then and also requesting Maranatha's assistance. I think that next year is going to be a very busy year in North America with camp ministry. So
I noticed on those summer camp projects and then other North America projects too, kind of what you were talking about the culture of friendliness and taking time to stop and get to know the people around you that you've witnessed in Africa. I've noticed that that's similar to the community that people on those projects have found. And I think that's what makes the dynamic for volunteers who come and work in North America so special, and how I've seen God working in North America on those projects, because people who maybe are retired or who maybe just don't get to talk to other people a lot, they get to come in these projects and make friends and then go on repeat projects. And I've just noticed that, and I've noticed how special it is.
Yeah, there's a sense of family that gets created in those projects, and people who are first timers discover that in 2 weeks. They want to come back and do more. They recruit each other. It's my dad and he subsequently met my stepmom, and they married on not on a project, but they met on a Maranatha project.
Oh, wow.
We don't advertise that on our website, but I know a lot of people who have, because it's like a self-selecting thing. They got people of common interest of service.
Common interest,
they're healthy,
already
and they go and
do,
but it's a blessing. People, find community and just really love that engagement. And they're off serving others, but they're just going home blessed and, and creating friendships. So
like a boost in their lives.
We have some pretty dramatic, I think Christina, our director of television, was on a trip recently in North America and interviewed a woman who was widowed, I think, and she just really found community and healing. And I think that story is a theme that is repeated, this idea of healing, loss, finding belonging, and on these North America projects. And it is really incredible, and a huge part of our mission that we don't always talk about.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that it's the cost to be involved is not as like an international where there's a participation fee, airline tickets. Just getting there is your cost. And once you arrive, they feed you, they house you. There's no other expense. And so it's within the reach of almost everybody can afford even to find a local project and drive a few hours and go serve, so we encourage more of that.
The only bad thing is they still have mosquitoes in North America, right, David?
But we've eradicated malaria. Yeah, it's the malaria.
Oh, okay.
It's the malaria association that's why I'm not afraid of it. My thing with mosquitoes in avoiding malaria is don't feed mosquitoes. So if you don't let them bite you, then you can't get malaria.
And
wow, it's so simple.
You have had malaria, correct?
Many times.
What was it like?
To be avoided. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had differing levels. I mean, years ago I did have an occasion where it got really quite serious, and IVs, vomiting blood, more sick than other times. It's just the achy, really like an intense flu. You want to feel like you've been flogged, and you didn't invite that, and a little mosquito. So just don't feed mosquitoes.
Noted.
Well, hey, David, thank you so much for joining us again, second time on Inside Missions. And thank you for, just your example of being willing to serve wherever you're at, no matter if it's across the world in Africa or if it's here in the United States. Everyone can serve. You have certainly showed us that in many ways. I know that we didn't even get to all of the, different experiences that you've had. So I guess down the road again, maybe we'll be able to have you back on. But for now, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And if you're interested in getting involved with Maranatha, make sure to go to our website, maranatha.org. And there you can check out our volunteer opportunities. You can watch our TV show, Maranatha Mission Stories, and follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, or make a donation. So that's your peek into Inside Missions. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
I've had malaria as well, David, many times.
When? When you were there, your family was there?
In Tanzania is when I got it. And the first time I got it was the worst. That was when I was like, I don't remember 2 days of my life.